let me introduce Paul as a long-term entrepreneur. He went from Canberra up into Sydney, travelled all around the world, became a world champion balloonist, and now owner-operator of, what are you onto, your third or fourth hot air balloon company?
Yeah, well, second and third.
Second and third. So you've got two balloon operations at the moment.
We've got two balloon operations at the moment. Two different continents, one here in Australia and one in South America.
Yeah. Now, you were the first one to move into Chile, there in South America, and set up a ballooning company, weren't you?
Yeah, absolutely. There was a local operator, but he seems to have fallen by the wayside. But there was nobody operating a sort of a modern passenger operation. Yep. And yeah, we were looking around for a new project and met somebody and talked to somebody, and 2014 we ended up taking a balloon across and just sort of doing a site reconnaissance and flying some of the local hotel people, and got quite a positive reaction. So yeah.
So tell us how you decided to just uproot from Australia, choose anywhere in the world, which happened to be Chile, and decide to set up a new business there in a different continent and a different language. You weren't speaking Spanish at that stage, were you?
No. Look, I still don't speak very good Spanish, I can tell you. Look, it's a long story, but I'm a serial balloonist. And I owned a business here in Melbourne back in 2010 when the drought broke. And I live in Sydney. So Sydney is home for us, for Micah and I. And we just got tired of the Melbourne weather. We'd have all, a whole group of passengers organised, go out to fly in the morning and have to call it off. And anyway, I had a partner in the business. He was a Melbourneite. He was actually the founder of that business. So sold out to him, went back to Sydney and started having a look around for the next big project. So talked to some friends and made contact with a young guy in South America, in Santiago. And over 3 months, we decided the best thing to do was to go over and have a really good look at it. So we spent a month over there. And I thought, yeah, this will work. And so it took us a while to get it all happening. And anyway, we're pleased that we did. And
well, what was it that took so long? Because setting up a business, what was it that took so long? Because setting up a business in Australia is really easy.
Look, I could write a book, Mark. The first thing is Australia is a first world country, and Chile is one of the better countries in South America, but it's second world. So, there are people like you and me there, but you don't have to go far off the beaten track. And you're right out there. So we live 30 kilometres from the Bolivian border in the north of the country. We're 1,600 kilometres north of Santiago, so a long way away from the seat of government, business, all the normal things that are easily contactable, say in Melbourne or Canberra or Sydney. Yeah. And so look, what's made it so hard? Everything moves very slowly. I mean, in South America, mañana, we'll do it tomorrow. The regulator there are some very good men that we've dealt with the Director of Civil Aviation there, but that whole regulator, they're broken. They don't know it, but they are. So they haven't had our sort of ballooning before, so that's taken a long time working with them. They're very, very slow. They can be quite obstreperous. I guess the big issue there is that they're basically a retired military regulator. Mm-hmm. So Air Forcemen who are retiring can bump up their superannuation by doing a couple of years with the Director General of Civil Aviation. So yeah, the regulator's been problematic. We've had a problem with the Indians. They were upset by another operator who came in and caused a whole lot of trouble. And then that particular operator left. But in the meantime, the local Indigenous, or some of them are fantastic people, but there's quite a strong group of local Indigenous. They're kind of a little bit like the local mafia, I reckon. They wanted to. They ended up taking the regulator to the Supreme Court. So we had our certificate to operate removed for 2 years, and we found that pretty hard going. I mean, I came home and kept going here and whatnot. So this time around, when COVID landed in March, we thought, oh, well, we've probably got another year's break here. We'll just look forward to get going with Hawaii 3.0. So it was a lot easier this time. We knew that we could kind of size up what was going on. Yeah.
So COVID hit hard around the world in March, but now it is in July, and you've only just got back to Australia. So were you trying to work out what was happening, how hard it was going to hit South America, or was it flights, or what was the delay?
Oh, look, a little bit of everything. First of all, we realised we were going to have to mothball the operation. So we've got 3 aircraft there and a workshop and a whole, vehicles and whatnot. So all of that had to be put away. We thought we'd sort of hang back and just take our time and get, organised, because we knew that we were going to have to mothball for at least 12 months.
Yep.
And of course, within 2 weeks, Qantas had stopped flying to South America. And then LATAM just started cancelling all of their flights. So we realised we were there for a bit longer. The other thing is we live in a beautiful place over there, and the weather in autumn is quite spectacular. So, we were just sort of taking our time, I guess. And we made the decision that we wanted to bring our dog home with us, and getting that organised. That was like, you can't fly your pet around the world in the time of COVID. Let me tell you, it's very hard. So we actually had to wait for the right flight, and all of a sudden 10 days ago the right flight came up and the dog was ready. Yep. So we jumped in a car and drove down to Santiago and got the dog on our plane, and we got on the plane, and here we are. Yeah.
Well, even getting our dog from Australia to Europe was an exercise and a half. It's also very expensive. I'm sure yours has been very expensive, but that's the sacrifice you do for family, including 4-legged family. Exactly so. Yeah.
Now
the funny thing is,
we had to book our kids into the cargo hold as well when we flew to America.
Now the funny thing is, Allegra gets out of dog quarantine, before you get out of human quarantine.
Yeah, no, Allegra the dog was out of quarantine this morning. She's been picked up by a friend of ours. We keep on getting photos sent to us on WhatsApp, and let me tell you, I'm jealous.
So your friend was able to navigate the lockdown arrangements that are in Melbourne at the same time, obviously, to get the dog. That's interesting.
Lockdown starts tonight. So, 4 hours' time, the city's locked down. Today was the last day of freedom.
Oh, it's cutting it tight.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what do you do for 2 weeks in quarantine? What do you do?
We spent a lot of time working online. I mean, we do what everybody else does. We run an office, a mobile office. It really doesn't matter where in the world you are. I mean, we run a great ballooning operation. We spend most of our time in the Atacama, and as long as you've got internet, it's amazing what you can do. So we're sitting in a very nice hotel room, thanks to the Australian government, and we're running our business, Jono.
Fantastic. Yeah.
And you don't have to pay for it.
No, we actually don't have to pay for this. It's been fantastic. I mean, they obviously had a bit of a fumble at the beginning, but they're well organised now. We've been looked after very well.
You're lucky you didn't fly into Brisbane, where they do charge you $200 a day for the privilege.
Yeah.
Now your challenges are not over, because you've flown into Melbourne, and I presume that's because the only dog quarantine in Australia is now in Melbourne. Flown the dog in there. You've managed to get in there. You've walked into an outbreak. Australia's effectively first major outbreak. You're in lockdown. In 4 hours' time, the state locks the border. Yet you live in the next state.
Yeah. So we don't get out until Sunday afternoon, and they've booked us a taxi, and we're going to go to my mate's place. We'll pick up the dog, pick up the car, get out of Melbourne, and then we think we may well go to where our business is based, which is northeast Victoria.
It's your second business?
Yeah, we've got a friend has offered us a house up there, so we may just spend a bit of time up there. I've got a couple of meetings with local suppliers that I need to get sorted out, and then we'll see where we are. But we're just afraid that when we head across into the New South Wales or across the New South Wales border, we'll be asked to do another 2 weeks of quarantine. We're not up for that just yet.
I'm not surprised. Yeah. So this is actually the beauty of being able to remote work, is that you can be very flexible and roll with all the punches that throw. We certainly had the same. We had a meeting in Chambéry, the near town. It was a very big business incubator that we're joining. The meeting was designed for Tuesday afternoon. We arrived on the Saturday. 4 hours later, the country locked down all the pubs and restaurants while we were in them. The next day, they announced the country is locked down, complete lockdown. A few days later, we booked for a week in a gîte, and we said, okay, it doesn't look like we're going to stay here just for a week. And 3.5 months later, we're still here.
Sure. Yeah. Well, look, we do the same thing. I was just saying to a friend of mine earlier today, if we catch a flight to Santiago from Sydney and then catch a second flight up to the desert, door to door, it's around about 20 hours. This particular trip's it will have taken us more than 3 weeks to do what we normally do in 20 hours. So, there's big disruption at the moment, but ordinarily, everything's possible these days.
You've left staff and contractors and things without jobs there in the Atacama Desert and in Chile at large. What's the economy like over there right now?
Oh, it's a disaster, and it will be for some time to come, because the government has declared a state of catastrophe. So all of the cafes, restaurants are closed. Everything's in limbo, and it has been since March. And I don't think anybody's going to open anything up until maybe September at the earliest. So the economy will be very, very hard hit, much more heavily hit than it is here in Australia. And I don't know what it's like in your part of the world, but South America, it's second world, slightly, it's not so well organised. People aren't quite on top of what's going on. They're not as compliant. And there's big consequences about to be rolled across on top of all those poor people.
I was in Santiago and got caught up in riots where they got tear gassed and the police come down heavy. There's a energy there that when people don't like what the government's doing, they take it to the streets. We see a bit of that energy here in France. There was actually quite a big, luckily peaceful protest yesterday, where 1,000 bank employees went and protested against the bank because they didn't get their COVID bonus, which the head office people did. You actually probably wouldn't see that in Australia, or the US for that matter.
We've had protests in the US.
Not on
Yeah.
So, Jono, what's the economy like here in the States? We were just talking about Chile and Australia.
What's the economy like? Yeah, so we're kind of in a position now where we've been going up and down, as there's no shortage of media reporting what's going on in America, particularly in Australia, and most of it's pretty liberal. And so here in America, cases are spiking again. As we know, there are some new hotspots: Phoenix, Arizona, Houston, Texas, I think is one. Oh, Dallas, Texas. No, Houston, and Florida is another hotspot. And so we're definitely spiking again. Case numbers are high. There's no doubt this thing really exists, but but what's interesting is we've gone through a reopening phase. So I'm wondering, without telling us, if we've gone to a herd immunity option. because, you know, we're pretty open now. So in May, the US economy added back 2.5 million jobs. And then in June, 4.8 million jobs. So, but we've got 40 million jobs to claw back. So it's, the numbers sound impressive. I mean, that's almost all of Australia's employment population. So, you know, it depends what industry you're in. If you're in construction, those sorts of things, it's business as usual. In fact, I've got a few clients in construction and they're busy as ever. Technology is doing fine. But, you know, everyone is aware there's still some challenges ahead. So people aren't spending money. People are being very careful.
Paul, you're in tourism. You are a luxury good. You know, it's not like you have to go hot air ballooning. Well,
Yep.
It might be that got that gene in you that you've got to go fly. But it's a luxury good. People are a bit more fearful. You generally fly with 5 to 20 people in a basket, which is relatively close confines in a usual scenario. How do you adapt the operations for both the market and the health risks?
So that's a good question. Look, the operation in the Atacama is totally dependent on international tourism, and there is none. And there won't be for at least a year, and probably then it will take maybe several years to come back. So, you know, we'll just be taking it the decision to reopen over there we'll be taking next year, I would imagine. But look, we're very lucky because we've got a couple of strings to our bow, and we've got an operation here in Australia which runs on the domestic market. And the domestic market here is good. I mean, we haven't been able to do much flying because we had a lot of trouble with the bushfires in January and February. So that was an issue. And then, of course, everything got shut down mid-March or towards the end of March here. But come the beginning of June, the state government said, okay, you know, we're reopening, and there was pent-up demand. And so we've been reasonably busy on the sales side here, and the domestic market, when they have the opportunity to get out and do stuff, they know they're not travelling overseas. So I've got my fingers crossed. You know, it will have been a difficult year, I guess, by the time we get to the end of the year. But the business is kicking on, and we're a micro business. So, you know, we're sort of flexible, adaptable, and we can roll with the punches.
Yeah. The tourism industry here in Europe is kicking on. You know, they've come out of lockdown very aggressively. You may have seen that some of the Balearic Islands off of Spain, they opened up 2 weeks ahead of time before the main country did. They chartered in 12,000 German tourists to hit the summer islands, had a great economic stimulus. Most of the internal borders are open in at least the Schengen zone. Some of Eastern Europe, which is not quite Schengen, is a bit different. There is some outbreaks. We've just had outbreak in Serbia, actually. So that's a little bit of an issue for us because we wanted to drive through Serbia, and we're doing some work in Serbia at the moment in Belgrade. That's locked down at the moment from pretty much anybody coming in. But by and large, we've just had in our gîte here. There's 7 rooms in a country farmhouse. Maybe a bit like the Atacama. It's a beautiful part of the world. The weather is stunning right now. And we've had people, another couple of guests from Switzerland, some people last night, and the other ones were from Germany and Poland. So there is money starting to flow. The prices are down. So it's actually quite a good time for getting discounts and travelling.
Sure.
Maybe half price for a lot of properties here.
Wow.
The volume which normally comes into Europe is not going to be there this year. So that's traditionally in Europe, there is a huge business in the summertime. That huge business is not going to happen this year. So while business is becoming quite normal, I think the economic impact is still, they're talking about 10 or 11% drop of GDP. So identical sort of numbers to Australia for different reasons. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, so also having a tourism startup on the side, we've been affected by that. You know, we only opened the startup February, started taking bookings. Next minute, COVID shut the whole thing down. So it's been quite slow, you know, moving along. We've just concentrated on building out the tech a little bit more and building some branding activities. But we're not expecting to make $1 million in our first year, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So tell me about your staff. How have you been helping your staff and your contractors that you've had to leave behind? You know, what are they facing? You know, are they running out of food and can't pay their bills? What's the life like for the general local?
No, none of them are facing that sort of situation. So in the tourism industry where we are, there's a lot of people, a lot of guides come up from Santiago and look for a seasonal job. And so we've got a couple of colleagues who have gone straight back home to Santiago, and they've sort of slotted into family businesses back there. So that's been really good. We've got a couple of colleagues who've stayed in San Pedro, and they've just negotiated rent hard, so they're paying half rent or less.
Yes.
And, you know, they are making use of the time that they've got to do other things that they wanted to do. It's quite a nice outdoorsy type lifestyle. So they're doing that. I guess they're counting their pennies and being careful. And we stay in touch with them, obviously, by social media and whatnot. So, you know, the network, network's a very powerful thing, even at a distance. So, you know, everybody this morning showed photos of the fact that the dog got out of quarantine before, so they're across all that. But yeah, I mean, you know, there's sort of empathy and a fair bit of support, but I think they're all travelling really well.
Yeah. Well, that's very encouraging. Certainly the mood around Europe is quite positive. There's a lot of barbecues and family gatherings back again. There's a sense of normality, although there's a little bit, obviously, more social distancing. Masks have just now become normal in public places. I don't see much of that in Northern just yet.
No.
I think masks are still a bit up and down in the States there, aren't they, Jono? Some of masks.
Yeah, there's certain, different states are mandating different rules and so forth. And, you know, there's information they do work, information they don't work. And, you know, goodness knows. I mean, no one. I think the hardest thing about all of this pandemic is no one knows what's truth anymore. And
Paul, at what stage do you sort of sit back and say, there is no end to this, it's time to do something else? You know, do you give yourself 6 months off? Do you give yourself a year off? Do you start looking around for something else now?
Oh, no, look, you know, we're not doing this to make a huge amount of money, but it's part of our lifestyle. It's something that we really enjoy. You know, I think we'll be able to make a good living out of it. Going on, what we've done here in Australia, and I should have told you this, we've cut back to baskets of 8, so maximum 8 passengers, and we've just adopted what the airlines are doing. So on the airlines, if you travel at the moment, of course, you've got to wear a mask, and if you come ballooning with us, same deal, we need you to wear a mask. We also, we have a COVID safety plan that we distribute by email to all of our guests before they come, so they know what they're expecting. You know, we'll take their temperature. We want to know that they don't have any symptoms. If they do have symptoms, well, then we'd like them to reschedule, obviously. And we just sort of tell them what to expect, and they've all been fantastic so far. They've been really good. And we'll unless we are told to stop operating, and we haven't been yet, we're just going to continue on. I know that all of the commercial ballooning guys or operations that I stay in touch with have all in the last month or so started to get back up and running, except from the Netherlands, where they haven't got an approval yet, but they're working hard to get it. So I think, what's happened is, as much as you can, and you can't social distance properly in a balloon basket, just like you can't in an aeroplane. But there are other precautions going on, and people realise that this is the way we need to go. This is the way we need to do it to go ahead, and we're just continuing on carefully.
So I guess one of the things there is that.
Sorry, Jono.
Sorry, man. I guess one of the things there, though, too, is that you obviously, you'll see a bit of a bounce back with domestic tourism. As people are being encouraged, well, you can't leave Australia unless you've got a good reason as a tourist. You can't leave as a tourist at all. And so would that be the big difference there, say in Chile, where, maybe domestic tourism, were you relying more on international tourism there?
Yeah, no, we were relying, in particularly this last summer, we've like more than 95% of our guests were international tourists.
Right.
And that was mainly because the social unrest that kicked off in Chile in October. So typically around 40%. I mean, if we go back to what we were doing beforehand, around 40% of our guests were from the domestic market, but the domestic market just completely shut down with the unrest. Starting in October last year. So this last summer has been totally dominated by international tourism. And of course, with no airlines flying, there is none. Yeah. So we've just got to be patient.
Yeah. So no big changes of direction. It's just wait it out, wait for the market to return, cut your costs down where you can.
Look, strategically, I mean, we've negotiated our holding costs down as far as we can. We kind of hooked into the tourism, some of the other tourism operators there. So we'll be watching very carefully from a distance as to what's going on.
Yep.
And I guess we'll be really disappointed if we have to pull out of there. But, maybe we do. I don't know, But I think we have to be prepared to hang on and just see how it all progresses. We're very committed to that particular site. It's from the operation of the business. I mean, despite all the issues that we've had to sort of find our way through, the weather is some of the best weather in the world for the activity, and there's a market there that's really crying out for a range of experiences. So there's a whole lot of sort of fairly traditional experiences and sort of Atacama Desert experiences, but we offer something that is a bit more of a premium. It's unusual, and there's demand for it. So we'll hang on.
The early tourism numbers from areas that are recovering are very firmly switching away from cities. There's a lot of rural-based tourism starting to occur in advance of anything in the city. There's a lot of drive tourism. It's obviously people in their own capsules, their cars feel safer. A lot more booking out of whole apartments or whole complexes, maybe with the whole family, rather than a room in a hotel. So there has been some changes as people are making the logical questions about how do I keep myself safe and secure.
Yeah.
The other one that's affecting some countries, the less developed countries, is what's the calibre of healthcare should I get sick? So we're seeing places like Uzbekistan who will give you a $3,500 guarantee that if you get sick, one, they'll look after you, but they'll also fly you out of the country and give you a whole lot of cash so that you can get instantaneous medical support. So
amazing.
That's the way their government has underwritten confidence back in travelling. And also, having been through Uzbekistan, it's not the most sophisticated part of the world. And I don't know the calibre of the medical system. Luckily, I didn't have to use it when I was there.
Yeah. Well, our part of South America is the medical facilities are completely stretched at the moment because the pandemic is still in full swing. So the nearest hospital, which is about 100 kilometres away, they were having to move cases out because they just simply didn't have enough facilities there. So cases were being shipped out of the region. And I don't know how long that'll go on for, but it could be another 6 months.
Yeah, that's pretty bad.
Yeah.
Conversely, here in France, where we are, we got hit pretty bad. We're half an hour from actually an infectious disease ward, and they didn't even get to half full.
Wow.
And they were taking everything from the whole department of the whole state. And it was, we were talking to a friend of one of the doctors last week, and he said the doctors are sitting around wondering what to do because they don't have their normal clientele coming through and they don't have any COVID cases. It's a little bit quiet for them.
Yeah.
Yeah, they actually, they quite stupidly locked down. They just closed hospitals here in the US during the original outbreak because they were, non-essential hospitals and things like that. And then, the one that they wanted to focus on. So we had a whole bunch of health workers that actually lost their jobs, which, just the stupid knee-jerk reaction of governments. But
crazy, really.
yeah, it's incredible to think, but most of those are reopened now. But they realised that the spikes, certainly the hospitalisation wasn't nearly as bad as they thought it would be here in the US. But yeah.
So Paul, where does your mind drift to if you think about a new and different industry? Let's say 6-12 months down the track, you're sitting there still twiddling your thumbs. Perhaps it's going to take another few years to recover. It's time to start another business. What's your sort of feeling about where you might be looking?
Look, we haven't really thought about it. We've got a couple of pieces of property, and the thought has been to liquidate one of those. And yeah, that's sort of in terms of, I guess, bigger scale bull plan. We thought about that, but yeah, I'm just confident, Mark. I guess there's people still booking to fly here. We're in a market that it seems to be so much more robust than what we were experiencing in South America once COVID hit. There is still demand here. Yeah. So I have a good feeling about domestic tourism in Australia. Okay. The business we have here it's a small business. It's really a weekend business. Mm-hmm. But yeah, the whole business of people not being able to go overseas, I actually think that's a great opportunity for us.
It's optimistic.
Absolutely, yeah. They are going to do exactly what Visit Victoria reckon they're going to do, and I think there's going to be quite an increase of money spent at home mm-hmm. in the region. So, we intend to sort of take advantage of that. And yeah, I have a good feeling about it.
It's the good old business rules, always follow the money. And if there's money there, despite on how it was created or how it's been concentrated, that's the place to hang out in business.
Yeah.
No, it's going to be interesting times. If you look at the parallels 100 years ago, and you probably know more about this than most because your father is actually a very senior, was a virologist?
Yeah, he's a professor of virology.
Yeah. He sort of understands these things a little bit more than the average business person out there.
Absolutely. He was a little bit surprised when we said we weren't coming home straight away, but yeah. No, he sort of follows everything fairly closely.
Yeah. And, he'd have a great understanding of what the likely pattern is from all of his studies in all of his years.
Yeah.
I've just been reading news about, 100 years ago with the Spanish flu, when effectively it was all over and dusted in about 2 or 3 years around the world, which is really quite a short period of time for something which was a lot bigger, maybe 10 times larger than what we're going through now. Maybe more because it was a smaller population in the world. But Australia did the same thing back then. They locked down for 2 years, no inbound, outbound boats as it was. Quarantined people on islands and hospital centres. But eventually, people developed I think, a natural immunity.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. Although, we're 6 months into this one, and the latest reports out of Spain is that only 5% of the population has had antibodies or had exposure. Now, Spain, as you recall, was it overtook Italy for a while as the #1 hit country in the world. They locked down exceptionally hard. And although they've come out of it quite well, albeit Barcelona being locked down right now, or the Barcelona state, or the Catalonia state, it's still it's a light touch. Most of the population hasn't had any exposure, which may be good, may be bad. I guess we don't know until a bit more time goes under the bridge.
Yeah, a lot to be said for living out of the city, I reckon, Mark.
We're pretty happy.
Yeah, well, I just think there's, and I don't know whether it's just the way our life has sort of meandered, but there's a lot to be said for living in a regional area. And I think there's plenty of opportunities in regional areas.
Yeah. Well, hence our Sandtrax group and Business and Bare Feet, we concentrate a lot on regional entrepreneurs, people that don't have access to a lot of business, or let alone worldly business people.
And what we found are now locked down, or like yourself, they're being isolated to a region or to a place in the world, and now they can't access, mentors or whatever it might be. So, yeah.
Very good.
We found a big increase in people reaching out. There's actually quite a big increase in the range of hubs developing incubation hubs, developing new incubation programs around the world. We've been engaged. Even the last couple of months, it's been quite quiet, hasn't it, Jono?
Yeah.
Georgia. Linda's just doing stuff in Uganda. I sent some stuff off to Nigeria today, Morocco,
even
Serbia,
Western North Carolina.
Even Western North Carolina. Yeah. Well, it just comes from there's a lot of demand. There's a lot of people who want to get into business. The jobs are not there, whether it's the economy, whether it's the rise of robotics and technology, or whether it's COVID that's just taken the jobs away. They're saying, look, I'm going to do something myself. I need to learn business skills.
Yeah, well, there's no doubt. You always want to have something in your back pocket, and the ability to connect with people and maintain a network and self-educate using all of the new online facilities. Yep. I actually think it's never been easier, to be honest.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And even if you don't know, as you say, what you want to do, use the time to build up your skills so that they're ready to apply when you choose what to do.
Sure. Yep.
Well, and I think also, the things that we've been doing here, having broader conversations, connecting more, doing more in terms of just day to day, like, we've been doing a lot more on social media. I think, I'm seeing a lot of people doing that. But it's interesting. It's created another challenge. Here we are on Zoom. We're streaming live to Facebook today, and it's created a space where people are tired of Zoom meetings, and it's interesting because there's been a real dichotomy with this online, meeting and gathering. Is that I've found that the conversations have been way better in a lot of respects. I mean, obviously, I'm very much. I love to sit down. Mark and I have had plenty of beers together and meals and all over the world, and so I love that over anything. But I've found the conversations we're having online are really good and really deep, and I think that would be an encouragement for me. For anyone out there that's sort of feeling isolated, that these are, even though it is another Zoom meeting or another Facebook Live, these where the connections are still happening, and it's the second human to human we can get.
I think the other thing is that the pace of conversation is picked up, not the speed of talking, but the involvement of understanding issues, talking through issues, what's happening, how do we react, what are we going to do. That's got faster. There's a bit more urgency about finding a solution or finding a new market or modifying your business to take advantage of the market today, which are changing, faster than probably most of our lives. It's changing very fast for all sorts of reasons now. And if you're not in those conversations, then if you're not talking with people, then it's hard to sort of figure out what's happening. The media is always a lagging media, and they tend to talk about things that are popular, and small business entrepreneurial news doesn't usually make it into the front page of a newspaper anywhere in the world. They tend to stick on more mundane, more broad topics, certainly mass media. But to get down into understanding business world, you plug yourself into all these meetings, these groups, these conversations. I've got international calls, same as you, Jono, and probably just as you were describing, Paul. Every day there are meetings, there are snippets, there's stuff going out, and people are sharing what they're seeing and experiencing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Actually, it's a bit like we used to say at Microsoft. It's a bit like drinking from the fire hose. There is so much coming down at the moment that you got to sort of grab a little bit to get a drink.
Yeah, podcasts have taken off, all sorts of stuff. It's interesting. So in the interest of wrapping this up, Paul, what would you, just there's been a few things there from you. Now, obviously, this is what's been really intriguing to talk to you, because some people are just outright, maybe you're being like, the swan where it's beautifully gliding across the water, but we don't see the legs doing this underneath, But, it's most people are beginning to panic, getting nervous, that sort of thing. You seem to be very calm, very methodical in your approach, and obviously part of who you are and where you come from and what you do. What advice would you give to people out there that are, that they're in all kinds of industries, they're in all kinds of spaces, and they're facing all kinds of challenges? Just in terms of,
I think.
Yeah.
Well, I think anxiety works against making good decisions. So, I think you just have to concentrate on what you're good at. There's all sorts of adversity out there, and you just don't want to let any of it sort of get in your way. You want to be sort of strategically optimistic, I guess. Mm-hmm. I think it's important to recognise what it is or where you're adding the value to whatever it is you're doing, and just make sure that you're utilising that to the best that you possibly can. I mean, that's I have a couple of core skills. My partner Micah has some great skills as well, and we've just got to make sure we're putting ourselves in a position where we're utilising those as best we can. And so we sort of think long and hard about how we can best do that. So, yeah, but no, look, there's no point in getting anxious. I mean, I guess we're kind of lucky because we had this problem a couple of years ago where we actually had to stop operating due to some local conditions that we were faced to deal with. We got quite upset by it for a period of time and just realised in the end we had to chill out and get on with it. So there were a whole lot of things that we could actually do, and once we'd thought about it, we just set about sorting it out. So some local Indigenous had taken the director of civil aviation to the Supreme Court because he'd issued us and this other operator with certificates to operate, and they didn't like that. They hadn't been consulted. They wanted a consultation. So the regulator was given the job of doing the consultation. They were making an absolute mess of it. So we went out and found a really, really good Indigenous lawyer, and we were able to sort of bring him into the picture, and the regulator ended up relying on him for some advice. And it sort of brought the process back in from where we had no control over it to at least to a point where we understood what was going on, and we knew that it was going to stay on the rails. So that was all. I mean, that was a good experience. We realised we had to be patient. We realised we had to do other things to ensure that we survived, and we got through it. And this the whole COVID thing that's happening at the moment, for us, we've sort of been there before. So, we realise we've got to change direction, utilise our resources, or place our resources really well, and that's what we're attempting to do. And there is a lot of anxiety out there, but, it doesn't help. I think you've just got to be calm and get on with it.
That's fantastic. I mean, that's certainly fantastic advice. Yeah. It's, keep calm and carry on.
That's exactly so.
That's very British.
Yeah. Well, that's fantastic. It's been fantastic chatting with you this morning, Paul. Appreciate you taking some time out of your busy 2-week quarantine schedule and to chat with us all over the world. And Mark, as always, it's been a great conversation. But so thanks very much. I really appreciate it. I'm going to pause the Facebook stream there, and we can keep chatting.
Thanks, Jono. Paul, well done.
Thanks, Mark. Good to speak to you, Jonathan.
You too, mate.